Now, I just want to point out that in your book, at the back of the presentation for admissions and new student services, there is a fact sheet with information on there. And it does go over the requirements and the documents required, but one thing that I really would like to point out are the admission deadlines, because I don't think a lot of people really pay attention to our priority deadline. And for summer 1, summer 2, and fall, that deadline is February 2nd. Okay, and that is for us to be able to get the admission letters out to students early so that they can make an admission decision, because perhaps UTPA is not the only school that they're interested in. The other reason that it's important that we admit your students early is because financial aid will not award a student financial aid unless they've been admitted, and I think you'll find that at every university, okay? So in order for them to really make an informed decision, they need to be admitted and they need to know what their financial aid package is. And in order for that to happen, we need to make sure that we have all the documents in so that we can make that decision. Now at UTPA, it's very simple. We need the Apply Texas application, we need a high school transcript, and we need the ACT or SAT scores. But most importantly, we need the high school transcript to include information on high school rank, and we need to know the diploma type that they're graduating under. And that's important because that is our admission requirement. It has to be recommended or higher. And let's say the student doesn't score a 17 and doesn't get the automatic admission, then we need the class rank to determine whether or not they fall into one of the other 2 categories. Okay? And what's been happening, and I know it's because it's very early in the fall a lot of times when students apply, that a lot of schools don't have the class rankings yet. But I would say even if you have the junior ranking, let us make the preliminary admission decision and get that information out to the student. Because just like all our letters say, they're admitted, but until we get the official transcript anyway, then that could change, and we don't get those till June or July. But at least let the student have the chance to be admitted, get their financial aid, and get all that information together, okay? And we have had, this past fall, a lot of transcripts come in without the required information, and I know it's because, you don't have it yet, or you're not comfortable putting it on the transcript because maybe it's not official, or and I understand that. But it's hurting the students because we can't make the decision without that. And I've looked through a lot of schools' admission requirements, and a lot of them they do have basis on class ranks. So it's not only UTPA. So, the more information you can put on it, the better. Now, what has happened is it's kind of slowed us down because we receive hundreds of transcripts that don't have the information. So we have to call the schools, ask for the information, and receive it again. We have to touch the transcript again. And then in the spring, we get another transcript, and we have to look at it again. So that really slows us down a little bit when we have to keep doing that. Once we make that admission decision based on the information that we have, I have never gone back and undid it. You know what I mean? Unless the student just didn't graduate, okay? And again, the reason that it's very important for us to get the high school transcripts as soon as you can in the summer, showing that the student graduated, it's very, very important, because if the student didn't graduate, then we need to talk to the student. And I know that that's important, and most of the time you do let us know, which students you have that didn't graduate, okay? Before I leave the topic of admissions, I just wanted to remind everyone that we are going to have our Bronc Open House on Valentine's Day, and this is the invitation. And there's a poster up here, and this is open to all students, and you too, if you want to come. And it's a really nice program. It's not just the usual, we're going to present to you, take you on a tour, and that's it. They're actually going to visit the colleges around the campus. They're going to go to a basketball game. They're going to interact. It's just going to be kind of like a day in the life, I guess. And even though it is a Saturday and there's not a whole lot of students on campus, I think it would still give them a little bit of taste of what college life is like, and maybe it won't be so intimidating because there aren't a whole bunch of students around. Okay, and your students will be receiving the invitations. The UTPA representatives are visiting the schools to drop these off and drop the posters off. So just keep an eye out, and if you will, please help us promote this event. Okay, so we just talked about admission requirements. Anywhere in that conversation did I say residency was needed to admit a student? No. Okay, so why is residency important? Right, because it determines how much a student has to pay. And we all know that that's a very, very important thing to know, right? How much you're going to have to pay. So what I did was I have a bunch of slides here that talk about all these intricate things about residency, and I've done this presentation a few times before, but what I would rather just go over is the quick reference guide that I handed you, because all you really need to know are the basics and what it is that we need to make the decision, because not every school is going to make the same decision, you know, based on, it's up to the schools really to determine what they'll accept in order to change a student from non-resident to resident. And as long as we're consistent, you know, I mean, we do have to follow basic guidelines, but I think everyone was just so scared to make a decision because it comes from the coordinating board and it's legislation. But I've read the book, believe it or not, and I've scanned it several times in the last couple of months. And yes, there are basic documents that we need to have and would make it very easy for us to make the decision, but there are also occasions where sometimes those documents just don't exist, but there are other things that we can use to make that decision, because our job is to help the students, and that's what we want to do. Sometimes though, if the documentation doesn't exist, well then the student will have to pay the non-resident rates. But there are 3 ways that you can prove Texas residency. And one is if you have lived in Texas the 36 months leading to your high school graduation, or you have a GED, and you've gone to school here, or you've lived here for the 12 months prior to that. The other one is if your parents have lived here for 12 months and they claim you as a dependent, okay? And then of course the 4th way is, let's say you decided to attend another college or university your first year out of high school, and they determined that you were a resident, and now you transfer to UTPA. Well, if they classified you as a resident, we're going to classify you as a resident. We're not going to make you go through all the paperwork or anything like that, because the rules do state that we can accept that. Okay? So that's good information, I think, for you to let your students know, because I think sometimes they have to redo the process every time. But again, if they can just prove to us that they paid resident tuition, then we'll accept that. Okay? Now there are several types of residency, and I think the one that a lot of us are very familiar with is the Senate Bill 1528. It used to be House Bill 1428. Let me tell you very simply and succinctly what the difference is. In the House bill, the residency had to be based on the parent. With the Senate bill, that changed, and it can be based on a guardian, a grandparent. It doesn't have to be the parent anymore. Okay? So that's an easy way for you just to identify what the difference is between the two. What do we require from a student to prove that they're a Senate bill student? Well, of course, of every student we require that they complete the core residency requirement worksheet. And I know sometimes we get questioned by the counselors, well, they already filled that out on the Applied Texas application. And that's true. However, the reason we have them coded as non-resident is because some of the information on that form, there was a discrepancy, or whatever they answered on that form said they were a non-resident. So if we want to change that, we need to see the information correctly. And we'll go through the worksheet with the student and make sure they understand, because I know for a high school student that's a very difficult part of the application to complete. It's difficult for us to complete it because, you know, it's asking a lot of questions, and sometimes the students don't know how to answer them. Okay? So that's not a problem. We'll go over it with them again. And then we just need their high school transcript, and we need a notarized affidavit. And we'll change it, and they pay in-state tuition. Okay? Now, let me give you a scenario since we're at this point right now, because I just had this example yesterday where I had a mother come in, and she brought me the core residency worksheet, the affidavit, and the high school transcript. And I said, okay, this is all I need to code him as a resident. And then she said, and here's his visa. And I said, okay, so he's an international student. And she said, well, yes, we're here. My husband works here. We're here on a work visa. And I said, okay, then you need to go to the international admissions office. Now, it was my job to look at his residency, but I can't admit him Because if you're an international student, there's another process you have to go through, and we don't handle that in our office.
Well, now, would he have to pay the international rate then?
No, because he went here, he meets the Senate bill requirements. He went to high school here for 3 years. We had the notarized affidavit and the high school transcript, as long as he could prove that, okay? Is anyone here from Hidalgo High School? Because I know that they do bring students in also in student visas, and again, that's okay, but they had to have gone to high school here for 3 years, bring the notarized affidavit, and we'll code them as a resident. But they are an international student.
What would have happened if that student or that parent had not indicated to you that he was an international student?
Well, see, they had totally filled the application out wrong because they filled out a regular application and not an international. Had she not told me that, I don't think we would have identified the student. Right? Right. But that would have put the student at jeopardy.
Yes.
Yes. So that was the little example I had yesterday. So. Okay. Now for students that have started the process, again, we need the core residency worksheet, the notice of action, and most commonly the form that we accept is the I-485. And let me show you what that looks like. And it needs to have the case type on there that says I-485. Now, does that mean we won't accept any other document? Because I know there's other documents that look like this, but they say something else on them. And the answer to that is, it depends. Let's take a look at it, and let's take a look at what other else documentation the student can provide, and then we'll make the decision based on that. You know, I'm not going to say no, because let's take a look and let's see what we can do. Because again, we want to help the student, so we're going to do what we can. There are just some circumstances where we just can't prove the case. And I'll give you another example, because this one happened just probably on Monday. A student came in and brought a lot of documents, but one of them showed that he lived here in 2006 for 6 months. It was like the lease of an apartment. And then he brought me a letter from a doctor in Mexico that said he was being treated for something in Mexico for the last 6 months, okay? Then he said, he brought me check stubs from 2007 when he worked at Panini's, but it was only for 4 months. And so he wanted me to add all this stuff together from different years to add up to 12 months. I can't do that because it's 12 consecutive months, right? And he said, well, isn't there something you can do? And I said, well, no, because it's 2006, 2007. You lived in Mexico the last 6 months. You know, why he brought me that, I don't know, but he brought me that too. So, you know, we tried. We looked at all the documents, but there was just no way to prove that. So he's going to have to, you know, the new lease that he has, I think he just signed it in January. So he's looking for a job, and he's going to try to work the 12 months and then establish residency and then come back. And I told him, I said, you can go to school half-time. You're just going to have to pay, you know, the non-resident tuition. And, you know, that's a lot of money for some students. So. Now for permanent residents, it's very simple. Again, if there's a discrepancy on the application, then we do need the core residency worksheet completed, and we need a copy of the permanent resident card. But one thing to note, and that's very important, and let me go back to that. I circled the date there because on that, the resident date has to be less than 1 year. I mean, if it's less than 1 year, he has to provide some other kind of evidence, okay, that he's been here for 12 months. So the best thing is, you know, if it's a year forward, then that's better for us, because then that's all we need to change his status to resident, okay? Now, sometimes we have United States citizens that, say, lived in Mexico, went to school in Mexico, and now they're coming to Texas, and they want to go to school, but they get citizenship and residency confused, and they think that because they're a citizen that they should be a Texas resident. Well, again, they have to meet the 12-month requirement just like everyone else to show that they lived in Texas. There's a lot of fancy words, domicile, and you know, and I'm sure you've heard all this before, but you know, there's, again, it's complicated. And these are really the basic things that you need to know, and we'll make the decision on the rest, and we'll decide. Now, if you have specific questions, because I know like in the last group they were talking about visas and things like that, and there are certain visas that allow students to take part in the Senate bill situations or residency or establish residency, but it's like 3 pages long. And if you really want a copy of it, you can email me. I'll give you my email address, and I'd be happy to send it to you. But if you just want to call me with certain situations and let us work on it, that might be better, because the list is very long. There's a lot of situations. And my email address is Gilchrist, GILCHRIST, @utpa.edu. Now, there was another situation I had where we had a student who was from the state of California. He came to UTPA to play baseball, and he was here for 12 months and got picked up with the major leagues, so he left to go play baseball. Well, he played baseball for a couple of years, and then he got injured, so he went home to California. And he started calling me about 2 semesters ago. He calls me every semester, and he calls me every week leading up to the semester to see if I've changed my mind. But, and I always know his voice when I answer the phone. And he says, okay, can I be a Texas resident? Because I did play baseball in Texas, and I had a scholarship. And I said, yeah, but Texas is not your home state. And he said, but I lived there for 12 months, and I played baseball, and I went to school. And I said, okay, number one, if you're going to another state just to go to school, that does not establish residency, okay? But he had heard from someone that, you know, if you left to play a sport or something, that it was still your home of record. But Texas never really was his home of record. He's a California resident.
About it where you vote, though. There's been a couple of cases in the Supreme Court of where you vote is your residence. Back in the early 70s, there was one.
Right, but I don't think, no student has ever told me I'm registered to vote, so I'm a resident. You know, no one has ever told me that. And a lot of times when they come to school here, they don't register to vote. So, bless you. So anyway, he thinks he should be a resident because he played baseball here for 12 months, that he did live here for 12 months. But, you know, he doesn't, so, and he's not. So, however, I have received actually at least 3 emails in the last couple of weeks from soldiers who are coming back from Iraq or Afghanistan, and they want to come back to school. And you know, Texas is their state of record, and they want to know, you know, can I pay in-state tuition? And I said, of course. You know, this is where you're from. This is your state of record. You can pay the in-state tuition. A lot of them, I think, as soon as they get back, they want to come back to school. I'm getting that because we've had several students even walking in wanting admission letters, because if they can show the admission letter to their sergeant or whoever, then they get released to go to school. So we're seeing a lot more of that.
I have a question. The state of record is determined by birth?
No. But for soldiers, you know, because they're required to travel, right. It is, right. But you have to live in the state for the 12 months to establish residency, right. But let me give you another example, because I also had an exchange student one year who went to Poland to study for her senior year, but in Poland the school year was 12 months. So she was gone for 12 months. And when she came back, I think because of the way she answered the questions on the application, when it said, have you lived in Texas for the last 12 months, she said no. So of course that triggered non-resident. So we had her come in, and we looked at her transcript, and we talked to her a little bit. Her parents were here, her family was here, she just went away to go to school. So she didn't go there to establish a residence, she went there to go to school. So when she came back, she is a Texas resident, she still is. So we did change that to resident. So those kind of things happen also. It would be the same as if we had a student maybe that, we've had this occurrence where a student went to Louisiana to live with their mom for their senior year because they lived with their dad in Texas. Well, actually, that student could probably claim residency in either state. So, so there's always a maybe or an if or an and. So, yes, sir.
What about a child of a military service member coming back?
Yes, the children, as long as Texas is the state of record, yes. Okay, so now I'm going to quiz you. Y'all ready for a quiz? Okay. Okay, let's say the student is not a U.S. citizen, does not have a social security number, but has lived in Texas for 3 years, will be graduating from high school in Texas, and submits his core residency questionnaire and the affidavit. Is he a resident or a non-resident? Okay, and under what provision will we assign him residency? Senate bill? Yeah, Senate bill. Okay. Okay, let's say the student is not a U.S. citizen, but has begun the process with INS and has the notice of action, the form I-4-185, and has been living in Texas for 1 year. How will we classify him? Resident. Correct. Okay, let's say the student is not a U.S. citizen, went to high school outside of the U.S., but is transferring from UT Brownsville, and UT Brownsville has him coded as a resident. How are we going to code him?
Resident.
Yes, very good. Okay, the student is a U.S. citizen or permanent resident, but went to high school in Reynosa. Okay? He provided an income tax return from his parents that states that he's their dependent and they live in Texas. What are we going to classify him? Right, very good. Okay, student is a U.S. or permanent resident, but went to school outside the U.S. Let's say he went to Oklahoma, and he brings documents from, yeah, he's a U.S. citizen. He went to school in Oklahoma. Right, he out of Texas, yes. But his dad lives in Texas and claims him on his income tax form. Right, resident. Okay. Okay, the student is in the military and supplies us with his DD-214, which is a form that they give us to show where their state of record is. What are we going to classify him as? Resident.
Depends on where you, theoretically, it's where you enter the military from, isn't it? Is where your home of record is?
Well, I think on this form you put on there.
It's, for a Texas veteran, you have to enter the military from Texas, am I correct?
Not necessarily, you can change your residency as you move around.
No, but I'm talking about to be eligible for Texas veteran benefits. I think it's where you enter the military.
Well, for veterans benefits, I don't know.
And I
but
would
for,
think it would be the same for the schooling there, too.
well, as long as it says Texas on this form, we're gonna grant them residency.
DD-214 is available. Then
Right.
No matter what state they are, they have been in the service, and that proves it.
Right. Do y'all have any other questions, or maybe any other scenarios you want to run by me? I'm not promising I know the answer without my book, but we can work it out. Because I know there's a lot of them out there, because I get a lot of phone calls. Okay. Let's talk a little bit now about new student orientation. And don't ask me because there's no date yet. I already asked that question. Hopefully next week they will be meeting to schedule some dates, but there's a lot of things that have to go into scheduling those dates because more offices than just ours is involved, because we have to make sure that we don't interfere with any payment deadlines, and and we need rooms and things like that. So it's not a very easy process, but we are working on that, and I have been assured that sometime by the end of February we should have dates to send to you. Now, let's talk a little bit about what a student needs to attend new student orientation. Basically, all they need is to be admitted. Okay? Once the student has been admitted, it would be ideal that if they're not TSI exempt, that they have either THEA or Acuplacer or Compass. And I'm going to tell you why that's important. Because if the student goes to orientation and they get advised and they are deficient in one of the TSI areas, the only class that they can enroll in would be a remedial class. And a lot of times, students are not very happy with that. And I don't blame them, we try to get the information out to them, but sometimes I think they wait to see if they're going to be exempt, and so they don't test, and so they're rushing to test before an orientation. Now, to tell you all a little secret, we're going to try to add testing to the orientation. So that's another reason why we're delaying the dates, because we need to make sure that we can coordinate with the testing office on that, okay? So that way, if we do have students coming to orientation and they haven't tested, before they get advised, we're going to get them tested, so that way when they are advised, they'll be put in the appropriate classes, okay? So we're working on that. It does require a $15 deposit. However, if they don't have the $15, that's okay. The orientation fee is actually $50, but what we do is we just ask for the deposit to reserve the seat, and the rest is billed to them with their first bill. okay? We can easily bill the whole $50, but it's just so that we know how many students are coming. We have to have the reservations because we have to make sure that we have enough classroom space, we have enough lunch, you know, things like that, enough materials. So that's the reason why it's important for students to reserve. If you have a lot of students that are ready to come early, I would suggest that you encourage them to come to as early in orientation as they can, because class availability at that time is way better than if they wait until July and August, because by then a lot of students have already enrolled, and so then they end up with the 7:30 class and the 4:30 class, you know, things like that, instead of the 8 to 9, 9 to 10, 10 to 11 like they're used to. And then students are very dissatisfied when they have those large gaps. Now, something else that's very important, and we just found that out last fall because we were surprised by it, I think just as much as the students were, was that if the student has 29 or less hours, they have to park further away than everybody else. So all of a sudden we had a rush of students to our office asking us to put in their STC grades, because we don't require like college hours to make the admission decision for an entering freshman. But they all came in wanting their AP scores entered and anything that would take them up to that 30-hour level so that they wouldn't have to park, you know, far away. So please encourage your students, and it's better for advisement anyway, to get us any transcripts from any other college or university that they attended in as soon as possible, just so we can get the hours in there and then, you know, see if we can get them past that 30 hours, okay? And that was... They park out in the perimeter. We do have shuttle buses. I mean, you don't have to. But I think it's just the idea of having to park out on the perimeter of campus.
Did students get a special privilege?
No, well, no. I think it's just sophomores, juniors, and seniors get to park closer, but...
Most schools, freshmen and sophomores get 60 hours. They're kind of lucky here.
Yeah,
Most
yeah.
schools get 60.
And actually, to tell you the truth, having been to a lot of other college or university campuses, the walk isn't that far here, you know, but I guess, yeah, well, we're not used to it, yeah. Yeah, well, that's the other thing, yeah, running late too. Right, yeah.
Running late.
Right, or they're coming from a job.
They
Yeah.
can leave earlier.
Yeah.
That's true.
Yeah, but sometimes, I'm sure you all face this all the time, you're trying to leave your office to go to a meeting and something comes up, so yeah, you're late, you know, so that happens all the time, so.
Traffic in the valley has just changed tremendously the past 5 years.
And especially around the campus too, so. But the reason that orientation is important, especially for new students, is because what we try to do on the first day of orientation is to give them information about all of the services that are available, and pretty much give them a quick tour of campus, because really until you're here and you have to go from one building to another, you won't really be that familiar with the campus. It's huge. A long time ago when I first started here and we would give tours, I would say 220 acres, tropical acres, and now I don't even know, because it has to be bigger, you know, but I haven't asked them to survey it and give me the right acreage, so. But you can just tell, even just walking to the other buildings, the daycare, for example. You know, it's quite a walk from here. And if you've ever walked it with a 1-year-old, 2-year-old, or 3-year-old, forget it. It takes forever. So we do encourage the families to come to orientation. That is a separate registration process, though, and I believe there is a fee. And so if you have parents that come to you wanting to attend the orientation, of course they are welcome, and the students are welcome to bring other family members also. But what we do is we do separate the students from the parents, because we do want the students to start, you know, trying to access this information on their own. And generally for the second day, because it is a 2-day orientation, when the students have an appointment to come back and meet with an advisor and get registered, we do encourage them to come by themselves. A lot of times we do have parents that want to come and do the schedule and everything, and okay, you know, we're not going to turn them away, but you know, it really is a time now for the student to figure out how to do things, so.
Cut the cord.
And sometimes I think on the first day they do go over that with the parents as well. But what is important, and the reason that parents come the second day, is because the second day is also when they have the presentation on financial aid. and on how to read the bills and things like that. And of course, we know a lot of times it is the parents that read the bills. I don't know if the students ever really read the bill until they get the call that it's not paid. And so, you know, it's definitely a process. Now, if we do move to the orientation where we have testing on the second day, of course, the students most probably will test in the morning and then be advised in the afternoon. Okay?
That makes sense.
We do send out reservations for concurrent enrollment students. Actually, the concurrent enrollment office does it. And I want to talk a little bit about concurrent enrollment students and admission and orientation, because I think we still have a few minutes. But if the concurrent enrollment student has been enrolled one of the 2 long semesters previous to their graduation in high school, we automatically admit them for the next fall term, okay? They do not have to complete another Apply Texas application. They don't have to send us anything. It'd be great if they could just let us know which term they're coming in, because a lot of times students want to come in the summer, okay? Oh, and I wanted to point out on the deadlines also, back when you came to the counselor update in the fall semester, our starting date for school, I believe, was like June 2nd. That calendar has been changed. It is now June 8th. And I think that that's going to help your students, because now they can graduate and then
June 6th.
okay. So if you had students who were going to come summer 1 but changed it because of the date, the start date, let us know, let your UTPA reps know, and we can move them back to summer 1, okay, if they want to come back in the summer 1 semester. Now what that has done is it has pushed all the other semesters up. So summer 2 will now start July 15th, and fall is going to start August 31st. And just also, I want to make sure that you look at the deadlines, because this year for fall, we're going to stop accepting documents 2 weeks prior to the first class day. August 31st is a long time away. They have plenty of time to get all the documents in. And really, if it's 2 weeks before school starts, there's very limited availability in classes, and you know, it's really late, okay? But going back to the concurrent enrollment students, their first semester, they do have to attend an orientation in their first semester in the concurrent enrollment program. However, their orientation is a little bit different because it's a 1-day orientation. They come in with all the regular new students that are coming in, but in the afternoon, instead of following the agenda of everyone else, that's when they get advised and registered, okay? It is very important also for concurrent enrollment students to meet the deadlines, because I know your process is longer. You have more steps because you have to get more people to sign off on the paperwork, right? So what generally happens is we only have a handful at the early orientations, and then we have a huge number at the very last orientation, and that happens every May. So if we could try to get the process maybe started for your juniors that are going to be seniors next year, started a little bit earlier, we would appreciate it, because usually the last couple of days before the orientation, we're trying to process all that paperwork, and it's a little bit difficult. So, because not only do we have concurrent enrollment students, but we have entering freshmen also, and we have freshman transfers with 30 or less hours coming in. So we have 3 different populations of students going there. Okay. Are there any questions about orientation? Usually we ask the students, we do send them invitations, but we ask them to reserve online, to just send us an email and reserve online. There is also one more thing I want to mention quickly. After a student applies to UTPA, they receive a secure sheet that they have to rip the sides off of and open up. And that information is from our IT center, and what that gives them is their username and password. And with that username and password, they can go into assist.panam.edu and they can see their admission status, their financial aid status. They can see anything. If they brought in classes from another university, they can look at what transferred in. The reason that I'm bringing this up is because a lot of students don't realize the importance of that piece of paper when they get it, and they lose it. And by the time they come to orientation, they have to present all kinds of ID and go to a different place just to get the password, okay? And you know, It's security and it's for their own protection, but it would just be easier because usually what's happened last year was as soon as the financial aid award letters came in, the only way a student could accept it was to go online, and they had all lost the piece of paper or they forgot the password, and it caused them a lot of distress because then they had to either come in person to the university and show an ID, or we had to fax them in. You know, it became a nightmare. Now we know that that's not a very efficient process, and we are working on getting that put online so that if they forget their username or password, they'll get it online. And the process for them receiving that information will also change. They won't get the piece of paper anymore, they'll do it online. So that will already start them on that process, okay? So that's gonna be, I think, a little bit easier, but again, I just wanna bring it up because financial aid season is coming up, and all of a sudden, they'll have to go in to accept their awards and they won't be able to. So, and I know that our UTPA representatives has put that in their presentation also to students, so hopefully they'll recognize that that's important information to have. Okay? Now, if you want more information, there's a couple of numbers, the $29.99 number, 292-7336, and that number actually rings into the visitor center. Is everyone familiar with where the visitor center is? Because students can go there for help as well. They should be able to answer all the admission questions and things like that. Because our office is like real tiny, and that's a big space, so sometimes it's better for them to go up there and get the information. So, okay, quick quiz on orientation. The student hasn't been admitted, but they've taken THEA. Can they sign up for orientation? No. How come? Okay, good. The student has been admitted, but doesn't have THEA. Can they sign up for orientation? Yes. Okay, very good. Okay, who can tell me if, this is an admission question, who can tell me if the student has a 15 ACT and ranks number 30 in ranks in the 30 percentile, will they be admitted? No. Right. Top 25, that's right. Okay. If they have a 17, do we need to look at their class rank? No. For the fall 2009? No. Okay, very good. What's the deadline for, what's the priority deadline for summer 1, summer 2, and fall? Very good. Okay. What's the late deadline for the fall 2009 semester?
August 31st.
That's the first day of school. Right, 2 weeks before that. Yeah. Now there is a mini term. I know you're going to see that in there, mini term 2009. Generally, they don't offer a lot of classes for entering freshmen because it's very difficult. Those classes are long in the day, but short on the weeks. So we don't usually encourage entering freshmen to take those classes. So some of the deadlines are somewhat similar, but just to kind of, you can tell if the first class day is May 11th and then the first class day of summer 1 is June 8th, how short that term is. So, okay, y'all did very well. Thank you.